Hey guys, welcome to the channel. My name is Morgan here at The Life of Tillmans, and today I'm going to bring you a video that I felt like is needed. And so I just want to share with you guys 5 things that really don't get talked about that much within the homeschool community, and maybe why, and how we can share those because it can be beneficial to other families. The first thing that I feel like does not get discussed a lot in the homeschool community is behavior with our children and discipline within our homes. And this is not just discipline for wrong behavior, but also discipline in staying focused in what we should be doing. Now, one reason I could think that people don't share those types of things, especially when we're here talking on like social media platforms, is that you don't want to ever put out anything about your children that could be embarrassing toward them later on. And I do believe that there's a way to share struggles with discipline without specifically pointing out your child. Unless you have only one child, then everyone's going to know that that's the child that you're talking about. But there are ways that you can share some of your struggles with discipline in your home, and you don't have to blast your children. But I think it's important to note that children are children, whether they are homeschooled, public school, private school. They are children, and they're going to make decisions that we do not agree with in our homes. They're going to have unpleasant behavior. And as homeschool parents, we are with our children a lot of the time. I'm going to speak for me and say that I'm pretty much with my children 24/7. So on a typical day, my girls don't leave my sight and I don't leave theirs. That's because we are homeschooling in our home and we're doing life together. There are still going to be discipline issues and things that we have to focus on. And I think it is beneficial for this community to share some of the things and practices that we have put into place to help with that. Our children are not perfect because they're homeschooled, guys. And there will be a lot of people that have you believe that their children are doing everything right simply because they are homeschooling their children, which means that every public school or private school child is into some mischief that they shouldn't be. I think that they all get into things and they all do things that are displeasing. It just depends on the environment and how deep they go into those things. So it is beneficial to share processes that you have in place, discipline strategies that are working, and positive parenting in the process. And that is what I always shoot for with my girls, is positive parenting. This does not mean pushover parenting, okay? My girls do not run me over. I think that there's just this stigma out there that positive parenting means that you are just letting your children do whatever they want to do. But positive parenting is a whole structure in itself of certain things that you don't do and uplifting your child and encouraging them in the positive area. So I think discussing discipline is something that's beneficial for the community. The next thing that I never see anyone talk about is sibling relationships. I have 3 girls and they are together all the time, you guys. Yes, they have volleyball and they have band. There's that separation, but my girls even share a room together. And they do enjoy it, but there are times when they don't. There are times when my girls need separation from each other. And as much as I did not want to believe it before I had my own children, birth order is a real thing. I have spent the last 12 years, trying to debunk the birth order theory, and it's a real thing. I come from a family of 2. I was the youngest and I have 1 older sister. There are some things about our lives when you hear about birth order that it's true, you guys. It really is. So now for raising my girls, I have a child who's in the middle as well. There are certain things that go along with being a middle child. And I will continue to work to not live up to the birth order things, but there are just some things that are just natural. You do have an oldest, you do have a middle, you do have a youngest. That doesn't change. But there are certain things that we know those children feel, and studies have shown that we as parents can help soften the blow, is what I'll say, because they are still going to feel some of those things. One example is I really try my hardest not to always put my oldest child in charge just because she's the oldest. Because number 1, there's times where she doesn't want that responsibility. Number 2, I have another child who's capable of being in charge and giving good direction so that they can manage things while I'm away. In that case, I really try to just change things up a little bit. I also try to remind my older 2 that at 6 years old, They were doing some of the exact same things that my youngest child does, but they just don't remember. So the oldest children sometimes say, well, you know, you're letting the youngest get away with whatever. But I try to make sure that my girls see a level playing field within our home, and also remind them that they were once 6 and they probably don't remember the things that they were doing at 6 years old. Birth order is a real thing, and I think that it's something that we need to discuss in the homeschool community, especially because our children are with each other all the time. If you think about it, siblings who are in public or private school, they wake up, they have breakfast, typically they go their separate ways. They may be in the same building for school, but they're in different grades, different classes, all of that, unless they're twins, and that's a completely different story. And when they come back at the end of the day, it's like, hey, I had a chance to miss you because I was hanging out with my friends and doing my thing and I was at school, and now we come together and we're at the dinner table and we're playing games this evening. I feel like there maybe is a little less time for arguments and disagreements, whereas with my girls, they're together all the time, so those things pop up. They want their space, they want their time, and I have to be able to provide that, which is why we do have our separate time every day for them to just be by themselves. Another thing that I feel like is not talked about, guys, is teaching subjects that you are not well versed in or that you just don't care for. There are subjects that you are not going to care for. There are things that I don't care for, or things that I just don't know how, or I don't want to teach. And that's okay. Don't feel guilty about that. If you have the ability, you outsource those things. If not, mama, you got to dig in and get it done, because your children are depending on you and they need you to help them through it. If you have homeschool friends and you guys can swap subjects, this is why co-ops came about. This is why outsourcing different subjects to online curriculum came about. If you have an option, do those things. But if not, you've got to do it. And we're just going to have to suck it up and say, this is a part of homeschooling. Period. We have to do it. We have to do it with joy. We have to show love to our children in the process. And a lot of the thoughts that we think about those subjects, we can't share those with our children, because then they're going to start to think the way we do. And then that's another obstacle, a hurdle that we have to get over, because now we have to convince our children and ourselves that this is needed within our homeschool. There's just certain things that you have to do. I mean, you may not like teaching English, but you can't say, well, I'm not going to teach my children English. It's not important. We have to be realistic, and that is not realistic. Their homeschool education needs to have English, composition, writing, reading comp, grammar, spelling, vocabulary. At some point, you may release some of those things, but they have to have it, guys. And so we have to just dig deep, pull on the strength of the Lord, and say, we can do this. We're going to teach these subjects. We're going to find all the joy in it that we can, and different projects to go along with it, and make it fun and fit our home, and make it something that we can teach until we're able to outsource. Another thing that I feel like is not discussed is curriculum frustrations, decision fatigue that goes along with that. It's almost like there's a trend right now of like, who can get the newest, best curriculum out there? And if you guys have followed along, I am not a curriculum hopper. I am in the stages for the last couple of years of trying to find consistent, steady curriculum for my girls. I have one who started middle school this year. The other one will be going into middle school next year. And I'm taking us to high school. And I need consistency. They need consistency. We are starting to plan for when my girls will graduate and what that looks like. And so I can't continue to hop around to different curriculum, but it is draining to think of all of the different options that are out there and see all of those things. And we get FOMO. We want to do all of it. Like, if you don't know what FOMO is, fear of missing out. But you want to do all the things. You want to get all the new stuff. If something pops out and it even slightly looks better than what you're using, you like, I'm going to go with that. We cannot do that all the time. It creates decision fatigue. I'll just speak on my behalf. And I have 3 girls that I am always trying to make sure that I'm getting what they need. And it is exhausting, you guys. It's exhausting. And I think that that's something that needs to be talked about, that it's not this fun, let me go out and find these great outfits to go out in type of shopping. Although buying curriculum is fun, but deciding on it for me has never been something that I'm like, I can't wait to sit all 10 of these curricula down and decide which one I'm going to use. Never did I ever say that. I've never also done 10 at one time, but pretty close. But it's not a fun process. You do get a sense of relief once it's done. You can say, done, wash my hands of it. This is what we're using and I'm going with it. But the process leading up to that can be very stressful. It can cause decision fatigue. And then sometimes you just want to put it down and you don't want to come back to it until later. There are lots of steps that you can take to eliminate that, but it's still a challenge because you want to do all the research. You want to find the greatest thing for your child. But in reality, let me tell you a secret. There is no perfect curricula. There is no greatest thing out there. Everything that you find is going to need some form of a tweaking to fit your homeschool. So just take it slow and try not to get overwhelmed. So while we're talking about this, put down in the comments some things that you feel like are not shared in the homeschool community enough, and maybe ways that you have worked through those things. I would love to hear them, and I know the community would love it too. And while we're talking about switching curriculum, the next thing that I feel like is not discussed is financial struggles. I don't care what anybody tells you, homeschooling your children is not as cheap or low cost as people make it sound to be. I have 3 children and they use different things and I have to find what works for them. Now, if I'm able to find something that my oldest is using and my other 2 daughters can use, that's a win for me. But that typically does not happen. And so it is expensive. And I feel like nobody discusses that. It's almost as if there aren't any. And living on one income, which is what my household does, is an easy thing to do. And it's not an easy thing to do. But nobody talks about how expensive it is to hop from one curriculum to the next, or buying all the school supplies, or replacing your printer, or the extracurricular activities and fees that come along with you want your child to be able to participate in things because they don't have a public school system to where those things are free. It is expensive. All of these books that your child wants to read, sometimes your library doesn't have them. Getting this literature curriculum that calls for 20 books and your library only has 5. Well, you've got to buy the other 15 if you want to be able to complete the curriculum. I mean, curriculum can be expensive. And one thing that I have learned in the process of going and teaching my youngest to read is that there are certain things that have been suggested to me that I won't buy. And I simply won't buy them because she's my last child. And I don't see the purpose of spending $200, $300, $400 on a curriculum specifically for her that nobody is going to be able to use after her. Yes, it is an investment in my child's education, but I guarantee you there are things out there that are way less expensive that I can get. I am a budget girl. I search for used curriculum. I drive an hour and a half to a homeschool store to find things used. I search the Facebook Marketplace. I see if there are different things that I can supplement in my home for what is focused on in that curriculum. Manipulatives for math, I try to see what we already have instead of buying more. There are just so many options for you to keep your costs down, but people just don't talk about how expensive it truly is. And it is something that needs to be addressed, because when you get into this and you're like, okay, we can cut it down to one income in our home, this will be great, and you budget for that $500 and you get into it and you're like, this is not enough for my 3 children. How are we supposed to continue in this way? And you feel like you're not doing enough because you don't have that curriculum that's perfect. Homeschooling is not cheap. It can be cheaper, but I would never say that homeschool is cheap.